Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fourth edition of this year's Backstage, which coincides with another very important activity, which is the presentation of a book whose protagonist we have here today, the writer and part of the protagonists that are told in the story. But let's deep dive into the history of today, which has very clear origins. Alfa Romeo had many racing departments with different names since its origins. One of the most famous was the Auto Delta, but in the mid-80s, Auto Delta finished its era, but Alfa Romeo didn't give up the idea of participating in races, and the new Alfa Corse was founded soon after with several projects. The Pro Car, Gruppo C, Formula Indy. Some of these also debuted on the track with different successes. Others were crashed dreams, but it was a moment which was very lively. But what, so to speak, became very important was the engagement in the Turismo categories, because Alfa Romeo in that period raced in most parts of the world, gaining good successes with different cars for a period which lasted more than 15 years. And all this was born thanks to the will of a person that we have celebrated many times here during our backstages, which is actually the head of the group of pilots, managers, and technicians, the head and the heart. I'm talking about Giorgio Pianta, the late Giorgio Pianta, who we can represent here with his family, and Giorgio Pianta Jr. Can you come here on stage, please? Thank you for the invitation, Lorenzo, and thanks to all the participants. I was a little kid when my father was dealing with these competitions, but I recall very well the DTM, even before with the 75. So I'm happy that we're celebrating it, and this year, 10 years have passed since my father passed away, and it's nice to see that many people have a good memory of my father. He had a tough character, to be honest, but I was lucky enough to have a great team with him, and he created not a group, because a group it's many people working together, but maybe have different goals, but theirs was a team of people who made his professional life fantastic. My father always said that he spent 23 years on holiday, and if he did this, it's also thanks to the people who supported him and also were there in any moment, even the difficult ones. Thanks to Sergio, and thanks to you for your invite. And now, let's get to the focus of our discussion. I'd like to show you something. When we say we publish books, we create culture, well, there are many ways to do that. There is one particularly noble that we lived with Sergio Limone, because out of all the documents that he kept during his career, well, he wanted to give to our archive the part dedicated to this period. It looks like a small thing, but it's not. To us, it was great. Our archive had newly being renewed, so we understood that we had to give value to these donations in order for them to become the seed of activities of study, of dissemination of culture, and some backstages were born thanks to these donations, which we do not take for granted and have a noble spirit, as well as a vision into the future. Just like the technician who worked for so many years showed. So I would like to call on stage Sergio Limone. Good evening to everybody. Thank you for being here. It's nice to see so many people and so many people from the team. So the ambition of this book was to create new bridges with the Alfa Romeo part of my career. I took part to many rallies. I was not a converted rally pilot, but then I took different roads. But the Alpha part was maybe the most luminous of my career. We grew very well. It was the result of an Abarth wedding, who we chose to work for Lancia, and Alfa Corse, who was coming from a strange period where it lost itself in 75. There were difficult projects, and also the structural part had issues. Titer went away, he was replaced, Pianta arrived. And so we did incredible seasons. Before 92 with the GTA, which I think it's shown here, and then the DTM. And then a very important cell was coagulated, which then went on with a different name. It became N Technologies when Fiat outsourced this sports activity. In the championships with 156 in the Super Turismo and then Super 2000 version. It was an extremely interesting period. And I'm proud I was in the right place at the right moment. And thank you for being here today. The book has two authors, so please ask Sergio Remondino to join us on stage. And I introduce their book, which you also saw at the entrance. Hello, Lorenzo. Hello, everybody. I thank you for being so numerous today. And since we will have chances to make questions, I would also like to call on stage Giorgio Francia, who is not here for the first time, but it's always a pleasure to have him because he's always full of anecdotes. Well, let's start from the book, because it's a conference and it is the first time that during a Backstage we introduce a book. But in this case, well, the book overlaps with the spirit of the Backstage, so to rediscover a story which is still a little bit young for the archives, but also took place in an era where the conservation of documents, so the shift between analog and digital, didn't leave a lot in terms of elements that allow us to recreate the real stories. But we have here the protagonists, so I'd like to understand from you how the book was born. Well, I'm famous for being very, very picky and peculiar. So I started from my favorite victim, Sergio Limone, who in the beginning was not very willing to write this book because he already said this. He felt more a rally pilot than a racing pilot on tracks, Abarth and Lancia. But I knew, because with Lasi and him, I already wrote 2 books on Lancia Delta. I knew that he had a lot of material, interesting material, that otherwise would have been kept in the drawers of his home. But I wanted that everybody could take advantage of this material. So I started from the drawings, from the pictures that he took with his Minolta when they did tests, for example. So I started from there, and then having lived as a journalist this history, I was at Autosprint at the time. As you said, maybe I didn't keep a lot of documents, but have the collection of Autosprint, luckily, and starting from these foundations, we created this book, which wants to be a storytelling of this fantastic adventure that followed another great adventure, the Lancia Delta. And I remember that when it became clear that Lancia would have stopped participating in rallies, I was kind of angry with these managers from Turin. I am from Turin as well. That retired Lancia and went to Alfa. But then, through the book, reliving the history through the books, I realized that the choice was not a wrong one, because it allowed to a group of technicians and mechanics to continue to work. And with the end of the Lancia program, otherwise they would have stopped working. Delta would not have been standardized, the new one would have not gone to rally, so that adventure came to a dead end. But with this new program of Alfa on the racetrack, everything went on. And so from that foundation, we started to create the book, The Second Person. I tired with my time was Stefano Torinelli, and he accepted almost immediately with enthusiasm this proposal of doing this book, and here we are today. It was the right choice. We know that everything that revolves around Alfa Romeo moves fans coming from the entire Italian territory and all around the world, because in 2023 in our museum we had 60% of the audience from abroad, coming from about 120 countries. So this conference will be recorded and then translated in English and put on the internet, so you will have an international audience. Sergio Limone, was he so tiring? He was born like this. He was stubborn, and he was a pain in the neck. I recall that he called me from Bologna to Padova. I was coming back from Mugello. I was going to Isoclima for the windows of those cars, and he tortured me. My son was in the car with me, and he kept me on the phone for hours. I recall this, and he's from Turin. He's gentle. He cannot, tell no to him. At the time, I had a different position, a different role. So now I can say 100% some things of the past. At the time, there were problems of strategies that you could not unveil. So is it true that you're coming back to the rallies? I could not say that. But that's his innate spirit. He's natural. But jokes apart, well, I met him thanks to another one, Luca Castalli, who's there, front row, was the co-author, publisher. We wrote some books together. Then Luca went to work for ASI, and he said, "Oh, I have an idea of doing, I don't remember, the last one was Pianta, or the 37. Anyway, I had a book on Delta in my mind, but there are many things to say about Delta, because there were 6 years, 12 world championships, there were more models. Here, not that there's less to say, but it's a different story, a fascinating story. And then here we are. Let's start from one of the highest moments of the first phase. We have here at 155 and 156, which basically are the two cars. I know that there were other projects, minor projects, some which saw the lights, others which didn't, but the heart of your work was this one. So many victories are in our hearts, but the most important one is the DTM of 1993. And when and how was this adventure born? It was a provocation, but it was not a choice taken for granted because there were many championships and these were some of the most difficult ones. Let's say that it started immediately after the closure of the Delta program, the day after. So we had a feeling that Lancia, due to a lack of a product and strategy, would shut down. As Abarth plus Alpha, we did a prototype 048, which we saw in the beginning. So it was the first common work during created the chassis, Milan the engine, before the 10 cylinders and then the 12 cylinders. So once the sports prototype program was rejected, I think rightly at that moment. Why? Because the 155 was born, which was an Alpha, because it had a crest, but it was based on not their type. The only Alpha thing, apart from the crest, was the engine from the 175. But the strategy of Lancia was that they had the need to show this car, to show that it was an Alpha in the end. So we were projected to do something in the Turismo sector. Oh, the most important championship was the German one at the time, which was raced with the Gruppo A, Audi, BMW, Mercedes. So me and a collaborator who worked also for Ferrari, Ignazio Lunetta, but we went to check these cars. The technology was extremely interesting, completely different. So we had to learn a lot. We knew that from 1993, they would have left the Group A, where we had to create 2,500 cars in order to race. We had to be competitive, but we didn't have the base. The Germans were good at taking the opportunity. They did a specific regulation. Alfa had a Q4 version, so with 4 driving wheels, and in the norm this was possible. The suspensions of the Tipo were not fit for the competition. This happened in 91. No, it was in the 90. Then we used in 92, well, we had in 92 a testing period to fine-tune the Alfa Abarth heritage and also the teams. Alfa again was going back to manage the races, and I saw many mechanics from that period. So in Turin we defined the prototype, Milan created the cars, and the GTA won the Italian championship, anticipating in some parts suspensions in aerodynamics, the DTM. It was like a big Delta, 400 horsepower. Pianta was responsible for Alfa, but it was also responsible for the technical commission. So we created a regulation obliging BMW to lose. And I should say that at the time, they understood it was their role, and they were very good. Also, they showed sportsmanship, so we won that year. And then we launched ourselves in the DTM with a new engine, new transmissions. We created 2 prototypes. We were still in Turin. We were not yet in Chivasso, so we created 2 prototypes with a lot of tests with 2 cars. In the end, we ran more than 3,000 kilometers with a racing car, or 2 racing cars. It's a lot. Like we, like 3. 100,000 kilometers with another car. So we arrived at Zolder in April 1993 with a doubt. As always, when you launch a new car, you have doubts. And I must say that we had a great satisfactions against a competitor who maybe in the beginning didn't think we were strong, and they were racing with the old car with 4 cylinders adapted, but they had a great team playing in their home country, 8 cars with Michelin tires. So they had a very specific idea of the quality of ours, because Michelin gave the tires to Alfa and Mercedes. So it was an incredible situation. And then a story began, a story that didn't lead us to win the championship, but it was a rich experience in good satisfactions from the technical point of view. So the last year we didn't win the championship, but the car won a lot of races. It was a winning car. Everything was invented, from the back, the rear windows, to the tanks. Everything was adapted. Trying not to sleep during the night in order to think what could be changed by respecting the norms. Well, most part of those kilometers were driven by Giorgio, I guess. Giorgio, what was the first impact, or also the second one, with the 155? Well, you know, the impact when you go on a racing car is you try to understand the level of the car. But I must say that it was always, at least for me, a pleasant thing to do. It was my job, but I was always supported by a team which was incredible. It is true that I did many kilometers, but it is also true that with me, supporting me, there were people believing in what I did. So probably now with the computer you can have everything, but at those times, and this you can prove, well, they trusted a lot what the pilot said. So me and the engineers created a good product. And then you also had the opportunity to to race with the DTM. Yes, I must say thanks to Giorgio. It is true that he was my boss, but I would say we had not a relationship of friends, but of trust. He trusted me, and he always allowed me to race. And he had trust in what I did. Nicola, Nannini, they were faster than me, but I kept the pace and I could transfer what were the problems to me of the car. So the advantage we had, I think, was that allowing me to race, I was always trained. So when I went into the car, I was like a pilot. So today, if you drive all day, but if you don't have a competition with others, you don't have a reference, a benchmark. But my benchmark were, of course, the others, but I could transfer to the engineers the issues we had, if we had some. Sergio, in your book, yeah, you have the same name. Okay, in your book, there are many parts of Sergio, many parts of Giorgio, but the richness of this book is that there are many interviews to other protagonists, and many of them today are here. Who could we give the microphone to? Well, let's say that in the book, for obvious reasons of time and space, we put just a tenth of the protagonists we could have put. But that's the nice thing of this adventure, because in this golden era, designer arrived, engine designers, aerodynamic experts, sports directors, mechanics. I see, for example, Giancarlo Bruno was the first engineer of Tarquini during the Alfa Romeo period. He's a person who could clearly say a lot of things. Giancarlo, can you come here? We see you often here lately. Good evening. Come here on the stage. Good evening, everybody. We met before. My first contact with the 155 was not on the racetrack. Sergio, you didn't know it, and now I'm gonna tell you. It was at a few hundred meters from here at Alfa Romeo, because in 87, when Alfa was absorbed by Fiat, I was in the experience department, and the first product which came out in mass production from this collaboration was the 155. And as Mr. Limone was saying, the chassis were the same of the Fiat Tipo. But in the Alfa projects, there was also a version with the twin spark engine, with the single block, not with Alfa Romeo, but from Fiat, and there were also 5 cylinders, 2500 cc engine. And at the time, since the 155 would have been launched many years afterwards, in the experience department, we took a lot of Tipo cars that were not camouflaged. And on one of these, in the experiences department, we mounted the 6 cylinders engine, not the 2500. To exaggerate, we put the 3000, which is the one which was also mounted on the 164, which would be launched soon after. So after the first phase of development, I became the person responsible for the development of the 155. The project was called 167, and I did this both on the racetrack and on the roads. So I love to discover this car with a 6-cylinder engine and also other ones, and this engine in 96 would have been mounted on that car. Of course, in a different position, in the longitudinal position. So you can just imagine that the Multanova were rare at the time. So how fun was it to drive this Tipo, who on the highway was like a rocket, and in Balocco, where we had to test with Gabriele and Moroni, etc., the development of the car, because with the engine, almost 190 horsepower, because we had the 4 valves, which still had not been deliberated, but we had many kilometers with the car. Then I left Alfa, regretting the fact that I had a good opportunity with Dr. Pianta. Dr. Pianta was very angry with me, and when he called me back in 96, he told me, come here and work for the DTM. And I went back to Alfa. It was a very pleasant comeback. And that season we had very good results. I was in the parallel team in Chivasso, managing Danner car. The other one was Fisichella's one. And then unfortunately at the end of 96 it came to an end, and I went not on this one but on the 155, the D2. We did a season in Germany with Modena and Danner. But to wrap up, I'd like to tell you an episode that stuck to my mind. I'd like to thank Mr. Limone for this incredible intuition, to Dr. Pianta, because I don't know where he found the money to develop this project, and then to Engineer D'Agostino, who developed the engine, which is the 90 degrees engine, because this engine was tested for the first time by Nannini in Silverstone, which was not the Silverstone of today. It had few chicanes, there was no complex, the so-called Mickey Mouse element. It was a very fast track, and it was the only car with an engine put at 90 degrees. And looking at the telemetry and making comparisons of the peak speeds, we checked that the engine was very good, because in the free tests, Nannini was 7-8 kilometers quicker than all the others who had the 60 degrees engine. So we understood that that was the right way. And then starting from the other teams, everybody in the team had that motor. Thank you, Giorgio. I must say that the team was very diverse, having names of people coming back from difficult periods, like Alessandro Nannini, who came back racing after the accident. Alessandro today could not be here, but we have a recording that you did with him, Sergio. Probably you are a pain in the neck to him as well. So in this recording, Alessandro says how his choice was a brave but a firm choice. Well, Pianta believed in me because, well, quickly, people think that you drive the cars with your hands, but you drive cars with your ass. Just to for the parking, you need the hands, but to drive, you need the S. The S is the first feeling you have when you drive. So your S sends the feeling to the brain gives the input to the feet first. So the hands are used afterwards just to correct some things, very little. Then the 155, well, it was the first year that it mounted a power steering. So Pianta believed in me, and we did a good team with Corradini. But how was? Did he call him, or did you? Did he call you, or did you call him? Well, first I tried a Ford, and someone told me, Abarth, you should try the Abarth at Mugello. But I don't remember, I don't know. But I think Pianta saw me, but I already knew Pianta. I always worked for Fiat. So he offered these things, this to me. He did the developments of the car, of course, both for the rally cars and the C2s. So he called me and we created a good team. Me and Nicola, with the mechanics, everybody together. We started our adventure. So Pianta believed in me. Okay, there were some technical problems. Anyway, we have already talked during our backstages about the DTM, but the 55 had a D2 version, which was as successful as the other one. So, Giorgio, you have raced or driven that car for many kilometers. Well, everything that came out from 74, 75 till almost the end, well, the input was I had to give the green light. So I drove everything that came out. Well, the D2, let's say that it was not my car. I became crazy with that front drive car, but we were competitive. We raced in Spain, we won, but a big advantage we had was having a team working to have those results, and there were no rivalries, no competition in terms of teams and in terms of pilots. By racing with Nannini and all the others, well, some might doubt that I was doing something different, but I had no complaints on what was done, and I must say that the results speak by themselves. Sergio, so you brought along two projects in parallel. Yes, the D2 started a little bit late because the main goal was the DTM with what Fiat called Classe 1. So the Divisione 2 was destined to the national championships, the other national championships. The Classe 1, Class 1 championship was not possible because we didn't have the great names. So the regulations were the same of the Super Turismo from UK, and of course, I remember that the dealers had put a lot of pressure on Giorgio Pianta to create a D2. We started late. We started with an external facility who created a prototype, the Albatec from Stirano. So we delegated Mr. Innocenti, mechanics, and the Michelis, who should be here, even if I don't know where, to be responsible for the projects. Then the car was finished at Abarth, and I remember, I believe there's a picture in the book, that February the 14th, I went to Campovolo at the Turin seat of Abarth to develop it, but it was end of February and we had to race in March, so we worked hard. The car was kind of competitive, but not as much competitive as we would, because it suffered from a front end lift. So I invented the brake air inlets or other devices to avoid this front end lift. Some countries we were okay, in others we were rejected. For the FIA World Cup in Monza, they didn't want to use this, which was kind of a spoiler to counterbalance the lift, so we lost the World Cup. We were unlucky because there were two starts. The first one, Nannini, was in front of everyone, and then there was a black flag. The second start, he was in the second place, and he remained in second place. But I kept that memory, and due to the fact that Giorgio Pianta has a brother, Alberto, who was director of production, we quickly put in place the 155 Silverstone, which was a car which didn't have the front end lift. So we took a Silverstone, we mounted on it a fender, the one of the actually a spoiler of the 33 Imola, and in the front another spoiler. I chose a very bad material, but we did 2,518 cars. I was also in the technical commission of FIA. They sent me a commissioner, Andrea Köppen from Audi, who was particularly precise. So he did an inspection at Pomigliano, which was incredible. We were the first to know that there would be a rejection, because the idea of creating 2,500 cars for national championships was something never heard of. And when at Trackstone I showed there with my description saying that there was this spoiler that could be lifted, extended, so it was a racing car. Well, the Brits started to be against us. First they said that we had to race only with a standardized version for the roads. So, and in 2 days, thanks to engineer Pollastro, I never met him, but I remember that in 2 days he solved me the problem. So with the Alfa Spirit, which I found in Milano and Pomigliano, so they helped us a lot. In the end, we continued till the situation, hostile situation against us and the Alfa Romeo brand was so strong that Giorgio Francia at Hulton Park phoned Ghidella saying, I withdraw the cars. So he phoned Cantarella. Cantarella said, you are the manager, the director, you can do whatever you like. So there's a nice film, and you see that Brits pay the ticket, and then there's the Alfa Romeo truck with the cars going out. So, of course, we found another agreement, but the championship was so towards the end, that in the end we didn't win. It was an incredible story anyway. But in the end, the title arrived. Yeah, it was one of the most suffered titles. And then the official Alpha, next year, where ProDrive had a Warwick pilot with front traction, front drive. This is just to speak that, okay, we won in Spain, we did second place in Italy, but in the Super Turismo, in order to be winners, we had to wait for the 156, the higher. At the time, Gabriele Tarquini was very young. He debuted with Alfa Romeo. Now he still races. That's the reason why he could not be here with us today. But we met with him some days ago and we interviewed him. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gabriele Tarquini. If you don't know me, I'm a pilot who worked for many, many years at Alfa. I would have liked to be there for the book presentation with my friend Sergio Limone, but unfortunately I have a competition at Vallelunga, so I will not be there with you, but I wanted to at least send my greetings to the audience and to Sergio, with whom we shared many beautiful moments of the Alfa Romeo universe. We asked him how he landed in Alfa Romeo. Well, I did 2 periods, almost 10 years in total at Alfa, and I drove almost all the Turismo cars of the last Alfa Romeo era, especially the 155, BTCC, and especially in Italy. I started back in 93, then 94, BTCC. Then there was a period of DTM with 155, then another period with 156. So it was a long period which was celebrated by many victories, because I was lucky enough to win a lot with these cars. And talking about the UK championship we were talking about, for him, this was the first championship that he won. Well, at the time, the BTCC was probably like the world championship. There was no world championship, but the BTCC was the most difficult championship, where 11 car brands participated. There were all the Turismo cars, all the main brands of the time. And it was something, well, Giorgio Pianta wanted to go to UK. It was a challenge that he took. Honestly, he didn't think we could win the first year, because he had one pilot, me, but also the other one, Simone, had no experiences in that championship, but especially the team. So we were rookies in the championship. So we had an expert team like ProDrive who helped us, gave us a logistics place in England, but then we had the technical supremacy, which was huge. So for the fans who followed that championship, there were many actions. Someone was disqualified, someone was withdrew the cars. It was a beautiful season that I recall as one of the most beautiful of my career, especially because it was my first championship. I had won some races before, but that was my first championship. And Tarquini also signed the last championship won by Alfa Romeo in any series, in any championship, which was the WTCC, the Turismo European Championship in 2003 with the 56 this time. And he won it on a day that looked like a Formula One championship. Yes, it was a beautiful race, the Monza one, especially because it was unusual in terms of audience for the Turismo races in Italy. There were several factors, because I had the same points with the BMW Jörg Müller pilot for the European Championship title, but it was the first race of Zanardi, the comeback of Zanardi to the racing track with the BMW as well. So the audience was incredible. No one expected. I think there were 60 or 70,000 people on the stands. In order to come in and get out, there was a huge traffic jam. No one expected that success. And in this context, the race cannot be cancelled in my memory, because during the qualifications there was a big mistake that I did. So I started last and my competitor was in the pole position, so looked like a lost championship. But then, as many times happened in the motorsports, on Sunday everything was overturned and I was able to win the championship at the last loop, at the last bend. It was an incredible success with that incredible audience, and I will never forget it. We also asked him how was the team at the time, and then he also told us about a turning point in 1994 when the car first was not perfect, and then you found a solution which proved to be the solution. What was he referring to? Well, it's the shift from 93 to 94 that indicated a turning point. It was November or December 93. Nogaro to try the DTM. So we also brought for tire tests the D2. Gabriele tries the D2, and on the track we were discussing, and he said, in order to be competitive, we should have the blocked front differential. So he said, I could be very fast entering the curves because I would not have the problem of the internal wheel skating. But he said that's not the resolution, because when I then increase the gas, I speed, because it becomes like an understeer. I said, we can do that because the differential is free, so we can invent something that gets blocked when you brake. So I had pieces of delta. It was the central differential of delta. So I went back home. I talked to the engineer, designer of the cables, Enrico Montanaro, who said, yeah, we can do that. And very quickly we invented this thing, which was a multi-disc friction mounted in parallel to the differential. So the point was that when you started braking, so there was a hydraulic circuit blocking the friction, and when you raised the foot, the car was free and could be fast in the curve. That was a prerogative. This was dedicated to Tarquini, because then when the same system, and I understood this late, when we used it at Donington at the European final race, well, the other pilots didn't work well because it was linked to the driving style. Tarquini was a winner, and he paid, of course, in the DTC. Well, I think about Modena, who had the Ceresina team or other teams. So when they had an official car, they did mistakes. You had to get used to it. But for Tarquini, it was okay, and it was a turning point. Let's not forget the aerodynamics. The fact of having a spoiler, which was generous in the front, was an advantage. and FIA at the end of the year. So when a technician obtains this, it's always a good result. So they changed the regulation in order to avoid that everyone could create special series. They said, no, either you standardize the spoiler at the beginning or the end of the season, and that's it. So we came to a compromise in the end, and in 95 the performances were not excellent, maybe also due to this change of regulations. So we tried to play more on the Italian championship than the English one. We tried to be fast on the Italian circuit. So Giorgio, in 93-94, in the winter of 93-94, you had to fine-tune the differential. Well, let's say that my work was that one. Let's say that with the D2 I was struggling because I could not drive it as I was used to. The four-wheel drive was easier. The D2, I had this front-wheel drive that was not easy for me. I lost the Spanish championship. Pianta sent me to win the championship. We won, but I lost it. I started as first, and then after a few loops I was fourth or fifth with the wheels turning. So the development was done, but I struggled. After the successes of the 155, the new car came. The 156, by the way, for the road, was and had an incredible impact on the market. Almost 70,000 orders were taken from the beginning, so it was a milestone of Alfa Romeo. And he worked on a car which was very different from the previous one, and which also you also had a different team, Sergio Remondino. Can you tell us what happened in the meanwhile? So the arrival of Nordauto, etc., and the private team. Well, the management, in one of the many changes of direction, decided to say it's enough and decided to give to Nordauto, who already worked very well with the 155, well, decided to give to Nordauto the management of all the Turismo activities. And it was a choice that many didn't agree with in the beginning, but it was a good choice, I think, because it allowed not to have the bureaucracy, the weight that a builder has, freeing up a lot of things that are needed for the races, but maintaining the internal brainstorming, starting from Sergio, who, as he says in the book, had the prototype of the 156 to work on 1 year before the car was marketed. And if we think about this, well, that's not a little thing for a car manufacturer, which still has to launch a car on the market. So to give the car to a department, so to show the car, it's not to be taken for granted. So having the car 1 year before the commercial launch was super important. When the commercial launch was done, the racing car was already ready. So I don't know how many other times this happened with other car manufacturers. I think it's a bunch of times. So Sergio, you had the opportunity of working with time. Yes, I had the right time to do the things well. We should not forget that in 96 was concluded with the loss of a DTC with that car, but especially Giorgio Pianta was sent away in a very bad way. So I had a completely new management. Many people who worked with me went to Fiat, and we were just a bunch of people because either they didn't know where to send us or they had this dream of making the 156 a winning car in the Super Turismo. So new suppliers. The chassis were not done anymore by Checo, but by another company, resins as well. A few suppliers were maintained the aerodynamics. Sergio Beccio, who's here, was a consultant that stayed. So the difficulty of this a shift, so from one model, from a less competitive to a more competitive model, was not easy, but we managed to do that. So this management level allowed us to have stronger links with the technical side of Fiat. So Pianta shortened the distances also with the technical and budget direction. So we could do many things that we couldn't have done. So they did these things in Fiat because the technical direction of Fiat liked to do something for Alfa Romeo racing team. So we had this advantage. So we did all the calculations of the chassis, definition of the geometry of the roll bar. We did a test at the CRF of suspensions that usually were done at a Michelin afterwards. So in the book, we have pictures of this period. And then we got to the presentation with a very mature period, well evolved from the aerodynamics point of view. I'm not talking about car, because the car was given to D'Agostino, there were 4 cylinders to engineer Secchi. I don't see him, but he's here. Hey, hello, hi Daniela. Be ready to come on stage. So the engine was based on a mix, the head of the Q4, the foundation, the base of the Alfa 164 Turbo. So we had to use things produced by Alfa. It was a very competitive car. No, the shift was mixed track. Ask him about the 164 D2. Well, this 164 D2 was a chapter that Giorgio gave to my friend Del Giudici to see the competitiveness of this car. Well, the difficult part was having a bigger car, more difficult, but the advantage was having a great suspension, especially at the rear, where we could not use the Tipo one, but we could have real racing suspensions like Toyota Celica, etc. Then the project came to a stall because this was before the arrival of these. So then we jumped on this, we did 156. So it was a nice chapter also, the one of the 164. So the cars were managed by Nordauto. We invited Mauro Simpson, Monica Bregoli. Today, they could not be here today, but Monica wanted to send us a message. Dear friends of Alfa Romeo, greetings from my part and Mauro Sips. Unfortunately, we cannot be there with you today but we hope we will soon have another chance to meet you in person. It is a great honor to be here and celebrate together with you, even though from afar, the incredible adventure of Alfa Romeo 155, 156, an epic chapter in the racing history, and also to think about our incredible journey in the motorsport universe. The 156 and 150, the 155 and 156 were not only racing cars but symbols of a passion, competition, cars which went on the racetrack with the only goal of bringing the name of Alfa Romeo to the top of the rankings. And I had the huge privilege of seeing the birth of both cars and going with them from the debut to the last race. So I was there for the entire adventure. So it's a pleasure to tell you about my experience, which started in '92 with the 155 GTA of the Jolly Club, continuing with the next year with the 4 of the Nord Auto team, winner of the Italian Championship, and in '94, a very important year for us, seeing us debuting in the Super Turismo. '95 is their DTM in Germany, and driving the Alfa Corse 2 team, heading the team, an adventure full of adrenaline, beautiful years where there was the willingness to win in their territory, to use a famous phrase. Then the last version of the 155 Super Turismo was developed that before being retired won the Spanish championship, obtaining the second also obtaining the second place in the Italian championship with the highest number of pole positions. And then there's the unparalleled Alfa Romeo 156, who gave us an intense red passion which lasted for 10 years, that made us dream and had from the beginning successes after successes, first in the Super Turismo version and then in the Super 2000 version, conquering 13 titles with Nord Auto before and technologies afterwards, 4 titles in Italy, 9 in Europe, to which 5 others were podiums were added in the World Championships. In my long story with Alfa Romeo, I had the chance to work with the best pilots in the world. There's a very long list. All are very important and they are all in my heart, but today I want to thank Fabrizio Giovanardi, Gabriele Tarquini, Nicola Larini, without forgetting Giorgio Francia. I'd also like to thank engineer Sergio Limone, the father of the cars, as all the engineers and technicians who I imagine are all present there today. And finally, 10 years after the loss, I would like to particularly thank my mentor, Giorgio Pianta, without whose vision it could not have been possible to write this long story. When this path started, I would never imagine the point I would have gone, how far I would have gone. My love for Alfa Romeo continues to be burning even now. Thanks to everybody, and let the race continue. Giorgio, the 156 was a little bit better than the 155. It was another car. It was a different car. So Sergio created something beautiful. With the other one, I had issues. With this one, was easy to drive. It went where I wanted it to go. So the car became a winning car. It was easy to drive because despite the other one, which was a little bit difficult here, the car went where you wanted it to go. So a good work was done. And well, midway, you also had to change a car because regulations changed. It became Super 2000. Yes, Super Turismo had a crisis all over Europe for the costs, which were too high. So we started working. I was also representative of the car manufacturers for the technical team. So we tried to have a racing version of the Rally's 1600 regulations, where we debuted with the Punto. It was a common sense regulation. BMW had a different opinion. BMW was another protagonist who had the veto right and blocked this program. So we threw the project away and restarted again with a new regulation closer to the Superproduzione. Superproduzione was a serial car with freedom on articulations, dampers, small brakes, so 15 size tires could be mounted. It was a Mickey Mouse car. The front wheel drive didn't have the space for larger tires. Then we found a compromise. Mauro Sibs was excellent putting together the four builders, because Fiat said, I will participate only if there are other four, Alfa, BMW, and then, I don't remember, Ford, Honda, and Volvo as well. And then Volvo didn't race. Anyway, the championship started. We were particularly competitive that year because in the beginning we were unbeatable. It was a surprise to us as well. Why? Because we worked a lot, while BMW well, were competitive in the Superproduzione, but doing the Super 2000 was not taken seriously, so they didn't work a lot. They wanted to obtain bonuses from Fiat. They obtained something from Fiat, not from Fiat. But it was an incredible, absurd regulation, which was done to highlight BMW. You just have to think that one of the clauses was to keep the shift of the serial cars, but it was done for the 127 for the Tipo. So with the horsepowers we had, it was impossible. I had to invent absurd technical things. The car was competitive, the Super 2000 was particularly competitive, and it is the one which closed the career of Alfa Romeo racing period, when the 156 was no longer in production, because the last winning in Valencia was 2007. Yes, Sergio, so this period also gave way to a series of private teams and pilots. So there was a moment when Alfa Romeo, there were dozens of Alfa Romeo in the latest years of DTC. There were satellite teams apart from the official one. Yes, and that's a nice part of this car. Look, like we were back to the 70s, where GTA 1003, 1006, and 2000 were racing. So from Conrero to Auto Tecnica, I don't know what many people were in the present the BTCC and in the European Turismo Championship, and that was in the real Alpha spirit. I could not develop this aspect a lot in the book. Maybe we will do that on another occasion, but that is very true, because for Sergio Limone, that regulation It was a pain, but practically, for those who raced, it was like trying and almost being able to put everybody on the same level. Daste, who won and was disqualified at Spa with the BMW, but a private person in front of Formula One drivers of official teams, and with the 156 Super 2000, well, this was obtained. Moreno Soli won a lot with the 155 before in several categories, but it's a nice thing. For example, we have here Gianni Giudici, who's a representative of them. He was close to Pianta, to the official team, but he represented very well the spirit of the private pilot racing with Alfa Romeo. And you said it very well with the 156. He had a good series of results. De Lorenzi, for example, had incredible results, and many others. And I think that this is another merit that goes to this car, which unfortunately, but the only thing it didn't win is the World Championship WTCC. It was very, very near to the victory. And then, as Tarquini said, races cannot be predicted, but that's the beauty of it also. And it never managed to win, even though in 2007, well, 2006, as you said, it was no longer production, but it was near the victory. Gianni, do you want to come here, say a few words? So you raced with DTM, Super Turismo, in any conditions and everywhere you race with Alfa. Well, behind these cars there were vertical men, because things that they invented. So he arrived at Nürburgring with a rally car to do the unofficial tests, and then we went to Mercedes, who had the BAS, so the most advanced technology, and we had a pilot without an arm and a pilot who was a farmer. These were real cars. There were women, money, correct communication. Then there was a big difference between Milan and Turin. These people had to give up too many aspects of their personality and shut up. It is not true that we had nice cars, as Limone said, because we took the DCS and transformed them in a racing car. You cannot say that. We can't, but it's the reality. The stands were all red. When things were not well, we took the plane, I brought the wine, we got drunk, and the regulation was fixed. Is it true or not? Steinlegs, because Pianta, who was a genius, had Steinitz, who was a German one, has a contact point. So we went to Germany, we had a test pilot, we were friends, but he was all day on the car. He talked to Chierici, Scartozzi, he knew everything. One day, I played a trick to him. I did a contract, a pilot contract, putting it on the desk of Pianta. He saw it, it was huge, like the remuneration was huge, and he almost had a stroke. Well, since you're here, and we have almost run out of time, I will repeat that I wish your book will have a great success, and I would like to invite everybody here in the audience who are part of these adventures to join us on stage so we can have a group picture. Before doing this, I would like to thank Sergio Limone, Sergio Remondino, Giorgio Francia, Alberto Scuro, who was here till the end. I know it was difficult for you to be here. Stefano Cominelli, who published this book, the Pianta family, who honor us with their presence, and especially the audience, which is always, always here in great numbers. Thank you.